Hello, and welcome to Progressive Short Takes. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Well, how did socialists do in the 2020 elections? Uh, well, we soon will know something more about this. I'll start by sharing the screen so you can see an article that appeared in Jacobin. The title of the article is There Was Actually a Lot of Good News for the Left on Election Day. And the article was written by Lisa Featherstone. And there's a picture of Julia Salazar, who was reelected to the state senate in New York State. And Lisa Featherstone says, but many of us have been refreshing the link to the Pennsylvania results for days. While mourning the voters Bernie Sanders could have reached, the mediocrity of Joe Biden, and the sad fact that so many of our neighbors and fellow citizens voted for Donald Trump, even after the chaos and mass death for which 2020, quote unquote, has become gallows shorthand. The implications of the presidential and Senate contests will no doubt be parsed for months. Drawing less attention are Tuesday's many progressive and socialist victories, a number of which would have been astounding just a short time ago, while conservative Democrats like Kentucky's Amy McGrath, Staten Island's Max Rose were crushed by rabid right opponents who humiliatingly out-Trumped them. The far left nationwide offered a way forward. Although Florida voted for Trump, that state also passed a resolution to increase the minimum wage eventually to $15 an hour. That wasn't the only progressive decision made by red voters. Many communities by, quote, red, unquote, voters, but many communities passed by referenda to fund their public schools, even in conservative states like Indiana. I asked education journalist by Jennifer Berkshire, co-host of the Education Podcast, Have You Heard, and co-author, both with Jack Schneider, of A Wolf at the Schoolhouse Door, The Dismantling of Public Education and the Future of School, New Press 2020, what she made of this. Voters routinely come together across party lines to increase school spending, Berkshire explained. Quote, if you look at Wisconsin, counties that went big for Trump also voted to hike their own taxes to invest in schools. You see this pattern all over the country, unquote. Arizona even passed a statewide tax to bring in nearly $1 billion in new dollars to its underfunded school system, a measure that Berkshire notes enjoyed bipartisan support. So she talks about Portland and Maine joined Florida in voting for a minimum wage hike, as well as voting for rent control, against facial surveillance, and for a local Green New Deal. The Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, among other groups, campaigned for all four Portland measures. Tenants were also winners in Boulder, Colorado, where voters passed no eviction without representation, passed a measure to tax landlords and use the money to provide legal representation for tenants who were facing eviction, which was another initiative backed by the DSA. All in all, Colorado had a feminist night rejecting forced reproductive labor for women, that is to say, defeating an attempt by the anti-choice forces to restrict abortion and for family and medical leave. And Montgomery County, Maryland, with DSA's help, defeated a property tax override. Oregon voted to tax the rich to fund a universal pre-K. The state also decriminalized a startling number of drugs, including small quantities of heroin, cocaine, and meth, a huge step for the nationwide movement against mass incarceration. Speaking of drugs, South Dakota, Montana, Arizona, and New Jersey legalized weed for adults for any reason, while Mississippi approved um, the use of marijuana for medical use. Washington, D.C. legalized psychedelics, all of which we will need, especially if Mitch McConnell retains control of the Senate, but I digress. Striking further blows to our cruel and racist regimes of punishments, cities elected and in some cases re-elected district attorneys who campaigned on platforms of reform ending cash bail, essentially progressive DAs, including Chicago's Kim Foxx, St. Louis's Kim Gardner, Mark Gonzalez in Corpus Christi, um, 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 and also Monique Worrell in Orlando, Eli Savin in Ann Arbor, Austin's Jose Garza, and George Gascoigne in Los Angeles. It looks as if Julie Gunnigal in Phoenix may also win when all the votes are counted, but that race is still very close. Speaking of rejection of the Confederacy, Mississippi voted overwhelmingly, 73%, to adopt a new state flag without the Confederate symbol, substituting a more appealingly neutral magnolia. In Congress, the original Justice Democrats-powered squad, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib, were all reelected, along with Medicare for All champion Pramila Jayapal, and Green New Deal co-sponsor Ed Markey, Katie Porter, a liberal Democrat, by representing historically conservative California district, was reelected by a comfortable margin, and progressive educator Jamal Bowman of New York defeated an entrenched incumbent and activist Cori Bush, became the first black woman nurse and single mother to represent Missouri in Congress. In fact, it was a powerful night for the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, which had endorsed 29 candidates and 11 ballot initiatives. Of those, at least 20 candidates and 8 ballot initiatives won. In addition to the victories for AOC, Tlaib, Bowman, and Bush, DSA won big in state Senate races. New York, the organization won 5 contests for state-level governments, re-electing Julia Salazar to state Senate and electing Jabari Brisport to join her, while 3 more DSA-endorsed candidates, Marcella Mataines, Farah Souffrant Forrest, and Zoran Mandani, head to the state assembly. 2 other DSA members, Emily Gallagher and Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, both formidable activists whose races were not endorsed by the organization, also won seats in the assembly. Philadelphia sent 3 DSA-endorsed candidates to state government, Nikhil Saval to state senate, and Rick Krajewski and Elizabeth Fiedler to the state house. And Minnesota also gained a socialist state senator, Jen McEwen. In western Montana, DSA helps send Danny Tenenbaum to the state house. DSA also won impressive local victories, helping to send by helping to send Greg Kazar to the Austin City Council, Jovanka Beckles to East Bay's Public Transit Board, Dean Preston to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and Janice Lewis George to the Washington, D.C. City Council. In Los Angeles, Constantine Anthony won a seat on the Burbank City Council, and also Nithya Raman, candidate for Los Angeles City Council, also looks like a winner, though her race has not been called yet. In Los Angeles Times called its local elections a progressive political shakeup, asking, is it just the beginning, quote unquote. There's no doubt that some is uprisings concerning George Floyd affected elections here, as in many other cities, amplifying the strong decarceration mandate of the city's district attorney. Los Angeles County passed Measure J, which sets aside 10% of county-generated funds for social services, including mental health treatment and housing in communities harmed by racism, prohibiting the local government from spending any of those funds on jails or police. The implications of all these wins: organizing works. You can create also lefty majorities can be created. Many Americans want racial justice and serious redistribution of wealth and a better life for the working class. Stop with that one. Just off that one, you can conclude progressives and socialists did extremely well, but now we will share a second one from Common Dreams that reinforces that. And I'll try to go through this as quickly as possible without repeating names of people who won. So there's a picture of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib speaking. Alexandria was speaking during a town hall hosted by NAACP on September 11, 2019 in Washington, D.C. So going through this, so once again, okay, DSA endorsed 29 candidates, 20 of them won, and 11 ballot, and 11 ballot initiatives, and 8 of them won. There are now Democratic Socialist caucuses in 15 state houses, including Montana. And the author of this article, okay, who was Mindy who is Mindy Isser, is she is a nationally elected leader of the DSA. She sits on the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission, maybe a future Secretary of Labor. DSA's victories, both in the primaries and the general, have rolled in as pundits and pollsters decry socialism as polarizing and raising fears that socialist candidates will end up backfiring and getting Republicans elected. Sanders' supposed lack of electability was one of the most commonly used arguments against him in the primary. His primary opponents and writers like Jonathan Chait claimed the vast majority of Americans wouldn't vote for a socialist. There was no way he could defeat Trump. While there's no real way to know for certain if that's true, it's clear centrist Democrats aren't necessarily shoo-ins themselves. John Ossoff, okay, is in a runoff and may lose. The Democrat Sarah Gideon, who raised $70 million to run against Susan Collins in Maine, has conceded. Looks like Cal Cunningham is going to lose. Amy McGrath raised close to $90 million, and she's going to lose. And Jamie Harrison raised $108 million, and he lost. The list goes on and on. Even Joe Biden, who seems set to be our next president, often spoke more about beating Trump than any policies he would enact once he was in office. Now let's look to see if there's any candidates named here that were not named in the first article. Uh, so DSA is moving fast. In the last 5 years, since 2015, when they got a boost in the arm from Bernie Sanders, and they gave him a shot in the arm also, they've been growing very, very rapidly. And their candidates have succeeded for a few reasons. They campaign on actual policies, have a vision of how to govern, and don't simply depend on the fact that they're not Republicans. These policies include Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, a jobs guarantee, programs that would improve the quality of life for working people all over the country. And because policies they support are so popular and inspiring, their candidates attract dedicated canvassers and organizers willing to spend nights and weekends knocking on doors and making calls, to get them elected. And notice, they were handicapped by COVID-19 this year. They weren't able to do canvassing to the same degree they've been able to do it, in many other by years, in the other years, and they still gained all these initiatives on all these candidates. And in Florida and Portland, Maine, the ballot initiatives for $15 an hour minimum wage passed. Most of the DSA victories have been in big cities or more liberal states thus far, but they don't discount the incredible organizing happening in the South and in rural areas. And they mentioned Marquita Bradshaw, who lost, in Tennessee, but she ran a DSA-backed campaign, in Tennessee, and she did win in the primary. And Kim Roney, endorsed by her DSA chapter, won a seat on the Asheville City Council in North Carolina. And while the Democratic Party is loath to give DSA any encouragement, but DSA member Tlaib may have helped to secure Biden's victory in Michigan by helping to massively increase voter turnout from 2016 in the state. Yeah, she really helped, especially in her district, especially in the Wayne County area. Of course, and that area was a big key to Biden's victory in the state. But DSA's ideology, focused on a society that works for all of us instead of the wealthy few, is far more inspiring to young and working people than someone who is running for office just because they're not Trump. It might take the Democratic Party to realize that, or perhaps it never will. But to the average person, the political conditions are changing fast, and DSA is playing a critical role in that transformation. So, the bottom line answer to that question is socialists did very, very well. And by the way, the articles failed to mention the win of Mondaire Jones, in New York State, and failed also to mention the win, of Ro Khanna, who hasn't said that he's a socialist, but he supports all the same policies. He supports the Green New Deal. He supports job guarantee. He supports the Medicare for All plan. He supports paid family leave. He supports free college. He supports the whole Sanders agenda. If there's any difference between Ro Khanna, and Bernie Sanders, it's just in the labels. I mean, it's just in the labels, not in any of the concrete things that he supports. So the point is, the Democratic Socialists and progressives closely allied with them did very well in this election, across country. And tonight, during the in-depth program, we're going to have some of the receipts on this. that we will talk about. So that ends this progressive short take, and I'll see you again.